I'm going to introduce our moderator, Wendy Queen. Wendy is director of Project Muse, which is a division of Johns Hopkins University Press. Muse is a leading provider of digital humanities and social science content for scholarly communities around the world. Currently, Project Muse hosts more than 800 journals and over 100,000 books from 400 leading university presses. I'll mention recently added a lot of Spanish and Portuguese content to Project Muse as well. Wendy serves on numerous boards and committees, including at AU Presses and the Hopkins Scholarly Communications Committee.
One thing that I left out of my bio that I think is the most important part of why I'm here today and why I want to be here today is that Muse has actually hired students from this program. And we've had students come into Muse and they're so engaged in the scholarly communications dialogue and they're so interested in publishing and they've added so much to what we do. So that's something we celebrate a great deal. So I'm hoping that someone in this audience here or online, we get to know each other a little bit better in an employment type of way. So I welcome that. So after lunch, I'm going to get some energy up in the room. So bear with me with that one. AI and responsible publishing. That's a big topic. It's a topic that every day we're all talking from all different directions. And, you know, we don't quite have the answers in every way, but our panelists, what I like about the way Professor Warren put this together are there so many different perspectives coming into this conversation. And I will tell you that we will have plenty of time at the end for questions. So write those down. Instead of stopping at the end of each presentation, we're just going to wait to the very end because I have a feeling that these presentations will play off of one another and maybe your question will be answered and a new question will arise for the end. So to get you in the mood for that, I do want to introduce the speakers all at once. Just to remind you, I know the bios are in the program and I know we all read them weeks ago when we're signing up and we're registering for the program, but I think it's important to come into thinking about AI and responsible publishing with also where are these voices coming from? What are their daily jobs and what are they bringing to this conversation? So I'll start with Simone, who will be our first speaker. Taylor, who's the Chief Publishing American Psychiatric Association with a background in scientific research. Simone started her publishing career at Elsevier and via the National Physical Library, Wiley, AIP Publishing, and has developed considerable international experience in leading adaptive and transformational change. One of my favorite words, so that's why I sort of was a little dramatic there. Simone has a passion for helping authors maintain an archivable record of their work in the scientific literature and is a keen advocate for improving global accessibility to published works. She has served on cross-industry groups for implementing data citation principles and for standardizing data policy and works to generate more equitable outcomes in compensation and career advancement for marginalized groups in the workplace. Then we're going to have a fabulous duo, tag team of presentation, Anna Jester and Jennifer Workman. And Anna works in business development at Wiley Partner Solutions. She frequently finds herself discussing preprints, manuscript submission, and peer review and editorial services, as well as gastronomic pursuits. There's a lot of foodies in these bios, by the way, too. So Jennifer, I'm switching to your previous bio. For her, if you're looking for a dialogue about functionality and workflows, want a demonstration or presentation relating to the previously mentioned topics, or will be attending scholarly publishing industry events, Anna volunteers on the Society for Scholarly Publishing, SSP, membership committee, on the Science Editorial Board, and is a past president of the Council of Science Editors. She previously served on the International Society of Managing and Technical Editors, an annual meeting planning committee, and the NISA working group for peer review terminology. And her favorite standard is NISA Z39-106-2023. And I'm not even going to tell you what that is. I'm going to let her, you're going to be in suspense. And she can tell you what that is when she gets up for her presentation. Her partner, Jennifer Workman, collaborates with societies, publishers, and editorial offices to customize solutions that improve publication workflows, promote growth, and help organizations deliver on their strategic goals. She earned an MBA with an emphasis in marketing from the University of West Alabama and has worked in the scholarly publishing industry for 10 years. Prior to her role at Wiley, Jennifer worked at J&J Editorial, both as a managing editor on several titles and senior manager of a large editorial support team. Outside of the office, Jennifer is a devoted foodie. You see the theme here in this partnership, and enjoys the serenity of outdoor adventures, particularly hiking. And we wish you were here with us, Christopher, but our speaker that will be online is Christopher Kenneally. And he's developed a wide range of in-person and online programs on issues facing scholarly publishing and the research community for Copyright Clearing Center from 2001 to 2004. In 2006, he created Copyright Clearance Center's tongue twister award-winning podcast series, Velocity of Content. As a freelance journalist, Christopher reported for the New York Times, the Boston Globe, among many other publications, as well as for WBUR-FM Boston, National Public Radio, and WGBH-TV, PBS Boston. He contributes opinion columns regularly to the Boston Business Journal and is the author of Massachusetts 101, A History of the State, from Redcoats to Red Sox. So I think you all can agree with me. We have a robust panel, and this is going to make for a very interesting discussion during the question timeline of AI and responsible publishing. So Simone, I'll leave it to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this discussion. Artificial intelligence really is nothing new. A couple of decades ago, we talked about neural networks, pattern recognition, machine learning, adaptive and predictive control, all technologies that have now evolved to deliver more specific applications in facial and voice recognition, for example. It was interesting to see the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics go to John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton for foundational discoveries that enable machine learning and artificial neural networks. In the publishing space, we have historically used these technologies extensively in data analytics to improve our publishing processes and to develop new products. These might include comprehensive content classification systems, for instance, that allow us to automatically index content, to aid in search and retrieval systems further down the line. Other examples include enhancing the editorial and production processes with automated reference checks, cleanup and formatting, and the increasing use of customer data platforms, which help us to understand user behavior, and this in turn offers insight into new product development. But it's the advent of generative AI and the launch of large language models that creates new content, which has really changed our vocabulary almost dramatically, so that we now use the term AI to account for everything from machine learning tools through creating plain language abstracts for scholarly works to using Scarlett Johansson's voice on Sky. And this really threatens to transform the way we live, work, and learn. Wrong direction. So I grew up in Freetown, Sierra Leone, a little peninsula city on the west coast of Africa, where a large iconic cotton tree stood at its center. Legend has it that when the first freed slaves arrived to found the province of Freedom in 1787, they walked from the docks up to the tree and gathered in prayer. You can see it just here, and these two pictures, the one on the left was taken maybe in 1912, 1914, when the law courts were built, and the one on the right was more recent, as you can see from the cars and the roads, in maybe 2021. When the tree fell in severe weather, in May 2023, my sister typed into ChatGPT a question: how long do cotton trees live? Well, ChatGPT responded, I'm sorry, but there's no such thing as a cotton tree. And it goes on to tell us that, you know, cotton is a crop that's farmed for annual use, and it generally lives for about 1 or 2 years. Well, we would respectfully disagree. Clearly, large language models and other applications of generative AI can only be as good as the data on which they're trained. So what opportunities does this provide, and how do we embrace these opportunities as publishers? Publishers, as curators of intensively peer-reviewed content, can leverage the high-quality peer-reviewed content we produce and use that to generate revenue streams, primarily through licensing. We know that Google in the past few months partnered with Reddit to use Reddit's content in training its large language systems. And we also know that publishers are also entering in this space, partnering with tech companies to deliver training models. Yet with these opportunities come challenges. So how do we ensure the integrity not only of the data we publish, but also of the funding to publishing cycle, so that we reflect the needs of the population as a whole and not a relatively small and privileged subset? This touches on themes that we've discussed earlier on in the day through the editorial boards of publishing of journals, and how we choose and decide on which research gets conducted, which research gets funded. How is the research conducted, reported, and reviewed? What gets out there, and what then eventually gets to be used in these systems? I have 2 nephews, brothers, who are about 13 months apart in age. The younger brother decided to lock his phone with Apple's Face ID recognition system, only for his older brother to open it with his own face. So this intelligent system couldn't distinguish between the 2 of them. Now, the consternation of my younger nephew was rather amusing to behold, with thoughts about his phone being hacked. But on that, while it's funny on one level, we don't have to be too imaginative to see how mistaken identity, justified by facial recognition systems, can cause serious or fatal consequences for some demographics. A recent survey by C4Disc, which looked at the publishing workforce, shows, and you can see by the graphs there, sorry if you can't read them, but the blue bars are all respondents, and the orange bars are senior and executive. Is the same data filtered for those who are identified as leaders. The sample itself is not very diverse. It's very female dominated, as we know, scholarly publishing tends to be. And not very many people identify as non-binary or gender diverse, and fewer men. We have fewer people identifying as men than we do women. But once you get into the senior leadership space, the percentage of women drops and the percentage of men increases. And if you look at the same data by ethnicity, you find that the proportion of people who identify as white are overrepresented in leadership compared with the sample as a whole, and other ethnicities are underrepresented. With education, it's interesting that it's almost a 30-30 split between PhDs, masters, and bachelors at the full sample level, but then when you go into senior leadership level, the percentage of PhDs strike. So clearly we do have some work to do before we can aim to achieve better representation that will help improve our processes and products. An important responsibility for publishers, particularly in the clinical space, is to maintain high ethical standards in the conduct, reporting, and evaluation of the research that is often on human subjects. Key to all of this is the capability for maintaining participants' confidentiality and anonymity, and any technological advances that seek to exploit the delivery and application of research results must adhere to these strict standards. But the ease of access to digital content has led to the increased unauthorized use of copyrighted material, including in generative AI tools and products, where the unauthorized use is justified as transformative or fair use. As publishers, we are entrusted with as publishers entrusted with the publishing rights of authors, we need to make sure we meet our obligations to protect the intellectual property of our authors, ensuring rights are exploited fairly. It is important that we have clarity of accountability in an environment where attribution for inputs might be attached to completely erroneous output that could have dire consequences in the clinical space. So how should publishers and rights owners respond to these? The fundamental principles of copyright were first established way back in 1710 in England, and were the model for the US Copyright Act that followed in 1790. And all of this later evolved with the Berne Convention in 1886 to confer rights protection for authors and creators. These protections still exist, meaning that licensing can provide transformative impact and deliver a responsible climate that enables artificial intelligence with high quality data. I'd like to conclude by saying that a framework for enforcing existing laws that allow us to safeguard intellectual property through a diverse range of solutions would be critical to ensuring equitable business models that allow all authors and publishers to be fairly remunerated for their efforts in delivering and preserving high value works. So I will take your questions afterwards and pass over to Anna.
Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer here, just to clarify for those on the call. I'm going to speak first, and then we're going to switch to Anna. As we talk about AI and responsible publishing, I think this naturally leads us to think about research integrity and ways that we can respond to many of the research integrity concerns that are going on in our industry right now. So Anna and I are going to talk today a little bit about some practical approaches to avoiding research integrity issues. Wendy gave us a great introduction. So I won't spend too much on this slide other than just to say, in case anyone has this burning question in your mind, Anna and I are not related. We just happen to be colleagues. We happen to both be foodies, and we happen to have the exact same hair. So I don't know if when you were a kid, you ever played the game Whack-A-Mole in an arcade or not. Just in case anyone's not familiar with that game, the idea is you have this big hammer, and a mole pops up and you have to hit it back down. And then another one pops up and you have to hit it back down. And then that's how you earn points in the game. I always found that game incredibly stressful. I don't know if anyone else had that experience. But when we think about responding to research integrity issues from a reactive standpoint, it's a lot like playing whack-a-mole, right? A problem pops up, you deal with it. Another problem pops up and you deal with it. We know that research integrity concerns have increased in recent years. We see this in issues like paper mills, image manipulation, and AI technology, and all of this has caused major ethical concerns in our industry and for the publication process. Managing peer review has become more complex and challenging as a result, and journals are struggling to respond to these new challenges and work to keep them from impacting the publication process on a day-to-day basis. It's easy to default to approaching research integrity from a reactive standpoint. and respond to issues as problems rather than actively finding ways to prevent issues and understand patterns over time in our journals. So some key objectives here, it's important that we mitigate risk by recognizing our gaps and vulnerabilities. So as we transition to a more proactive space, we must also use tools that help us make our findings explainable so that we can better know how to take action and address concerns before they become issues. We need to look at areas where we can continually improve, right? As we screen for more research integrity concerns than we have in the past, we need to be able to understand what we're finding and how to improve our processes as a result. And then lastly, I think it's also important that we move into a proactive space by horizon scanning. So looking towards the future, recognizing trends and emerging threats before they become issues. So what does this look like practically? As we screen for more research integrity issues on a daily basis and address those concerns, it's important that we make adjustments to our journal policies. This means we need to think ahead about how any research integrity issues that we find are escalated and managed within the editorial office. It also means that we need to ensure that our policies are up to date and that they're clearly communicated to all of the stakeholders in the peer review process. And it's also important that any policies that we implement are well operationalized across journal portfolios and across journals. I have some do's and don'ts listed on this slide. I won't read through all of them because I know that we are limited on time. But the one piece I want to point to here is under the don't category. I think the biggest point with journal policy is we cannot wait until we find a problem with the manuscript to change our policy. It's important that that is dealt with prior to problems being found. And it's not helpful to assume that just because you haven't encountered a problem yet that you won't in the future. So I think that this is always a helpful place to start with journal policy and making sure that we are updating those on a regular basis. Before we talk a little bit more about technology, I want to say a brief word on standardization. There are a variety of ways that standardization can help us, but at the heart of standardization, it's important to realize that what we're talking about is organization around operations that ensure consistency and efficiency in our journals. So that is at the heart of what we're trying to do with standardization. Standardization does not mean a journal or a portfolio can't have customizations in their workflow. We must have solid reasoning and criteria when we're introducing customization. So when we're looking at streamlining our processes and our workflows to make sure that there's consistency across the portfolio, it's important that we have reasoning for reasons why we may deviate to customizations within that workflow. And there are a variety of technology. Trying to switch to the next slide. There are a variety of technology tools that are being developed to help support organizations as they respond to research integrity concerns. At Wiley, we've developed a software called Research Exchange. And the philosophy behind this software is to have a proactive approach in mind. So our platform is made up of 3 components that include submission, screening, and review. Each of these components, which Anna is going to dive into a little bit in a minute, will give editorial teams the tools they need so that they can better focus on submission and quality checks within journals. And it's important when we talk about technology to make the point that future use of technology is not a replacement for human judgment or human decision. So we can use technology as a tool. It's an important tool that makes our jobs more efficient, that helps us better screen for research integrity issues, but it's not a replacement for human judgment and for human expertise that's required as we're screening papers in our journals. So Anna's going to share some more details about how we approach technology tools at Wiley through Research Exchange. And we're going to transition over to Anna now. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right, so as you can see, I really enjoy talking about software and all things, so please don't hesitate to come talk with us later as well. But one of the things that is very important for me Why is it important that we're getting things right? Well, we don't want to have retractions. We don't want to have erratum. We don't want to have incorrect information. And as Simone noted, it could have serious implications in a clinical setting, right? So part of the reason that research exchange submission is something that's been very helpful to us, not just because it makes it author friendly. So literally authors are uploading their paper and then the system is actually going through and then saying and asking the author to confirm, is this your title? Is this who you are? Is this your affiliation? So rather than just copying and pasting something in, I don't know if anyone else here is extremely excited to copy and paste their life away, but I had other things to do. But having the author eyes on it and go, oh, that isn't my affiliation, right? Or right there, very important. So even at that stage in the process, as part of submission, we're building things in that really help make sure the information that is collected is correct. So that's one of the great things. You don't have to edit it if it was correct at the start of the process or before you saw it, right? And then, so I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about screening as well. So after the submission process, that was clearly the fastest anyone can get through a submission process ever, right? But when it's time to talk about screening. So has anyone here ever been asked to review a paper that clearly was not in scope for the journal or clearly wasn't necessarily written by a human? Did that make you excited in a way you would like to have happen again? That might have been exciting anyway, but yeah. So really being able to run a number of different screenings automatically on a paper after it has been uploaded and is part of the system is crucial. So I'm going to talk about a number of those here, but the first one I want to talk about is making sure that someone is an author. So I love how much this ties into the fact that Simone has nephews that are very similar. Jennifer and I have hair that is very similar. So which one is it, right? It is important to know. And certainly we can use tools like persistent identifiers, ORCIDs, to make sure that we're able to actually identify that this particular author is there. But we can also see information in the actual database as well. So, well, maybe it's actually this one. Maybe it's that one. How many publications have they had with us? And then, can we verify they're actually a person? Not something we really thought about 20 years ago as a problem, right? Like, yeah, but here we are. So those kinds of things can be very important when you're screening. And it is really important to make sure you know the answers to those questions before we continue on down the process, right? Some of the other ones too, and here I think I'm gonna, apologies, Christopher, I'm gonna put you right over here for just a moment. So you can kind of see here from the screening. So there are a number of checks. I will not talk about all of them right now, but language and word count, as well as suspicious words. If you're in an area that says big data and that phrase isn't big data, then you can tell pretty quickly, oh, someone tried not to plagiarize something and change these words around, right? So there might be suspicious words that you're looking out for. Most of us are familiar with authenticate. Some of us have called it turn it in at certain points in our lives. Some of us have called it cross check or similarity check, but really checking the corpus of what has already been published to make sure that this is not a paper that is based on plagiarized work. So very important to know right off. Same for submission similarity. So if you happen to have 40 journals and an author has submitted this particular paper to 3 of them, I would guess at least 2 of your editors want to know right away, right? So that is something that we need to know and be able to source to people, as well as machine generated content detection. So we can really actually take a look at things and go, does this look like it was a human or not? Problematic phrases, scope match. So is this paper in scope for this journal, right? One of the big things that a paper mill might do is provide a paper that could be submitted to a journal that doesn't really match the scope. So maybe it made sense on some level, but it wasn't in scope. So all of these things, and then reference analysis too, which I'm going to show you a little bit more of here. The reference analysis, as a kid in high school, I never thought I'm going to stand in front of a group of people and tell how excited I am about reference analysis, but here we are. So this one has gone through the references that are part of this paper and found 4 that have issues. And I've got some options up here. I know it's small. We have actually submitted these slides as part of for the conference too, so you can see them there. But it is important if Crossref does not recognize this DOI, right? That says something to me, oh, very quickly. The next one says this reference lacks a DOI. And if this is, a journal article from this year or last year, that seems a little bit strange to me, right? Some of the other ones, that's number 11 here in this list, Retraction Watch reports that this, what is it? It's a retraction watch. So it has pretty self-explanatory, but has noted that this was retracted on this date, right? So most of us are probably not hoping that the research we're about to publish is only supported by things that were retracted, right? So all of these kinds of tools are things that we can do as part of the process and give us alerts. So as Simone already said as well, it is important that we're not just taking what a tool can do and saying that's enough. As Jennifer noted as well, we still need people to say, well, here are the responses to the checks that we have run automatically. Is this appropriate or not? And then should we send this out for review, right? So I would guess most of us in journals have heard there are not enough peer reviewers to go around, right? So let's certainly not send them papers that they shouldn't even be bothered with, right? It would be much better if your editors and your reviewers are not seeing those papers at all and wasting their time on them. At least that is my personal opinion. So those kinds of, sorry about that. So those kinds of tools really are in this space, right? They're all things that we can take out of what we know about this manuscript or what we can identify from it and really pull in information about screening regarding whether it's researcher misconduct or potential paper mills or machine generated content or other things related to the scope. And it's really a large picture. And the thing that we really want to stress today as well is it turns out it's not getting any smaller, right? So once you've sent it to review, you might also then have other things that kind of come to mind. So one of the reasons for the standardization discussion that Jennifer included is it is really easy to compare things when you're comparing apples to apples. If you're comparing apples to oranges, they're still fruit, but it's not as easy. So data really helps us build the narratives about what is important. So in this example, over on the right-hand side, what we've known, because the reviews configurations themselves are identical and we can compare these things, the system is sourcing now to an editor. 3 duplicates of this report were submitted by 2 reviewers. So what that means is this exact review text has been submitted for other papers and by more than 1 user in the system, all of which says, okay, it is time for a human to get involved, right? And I would just say, you know, all of these kinds of things that can be done when you are using a standardized workflow, when you're able to compare equally, these are things that help us determine what the next steps should be. So in that, I hope that we've hopefully convinced you, or maybe you were already there with us, to move from being reactive to being proactive. So all of us have come across something in our lives and wanted to step back and go, oh, I don't know. You know, we really have to step forward and go, oh, let me take a look at that. And let me take a look at it in a meaningful way. I've just managed to unname myself. Let me take a look at it in a meaningful way and move away from the idea that this journal article is the most important thing, right? We're all part of this larger situation. And we need to make sure that we're using informed actions, informed tools, informed policies to really move from just being reactive to being proactive. Because the people who are going to do things that will get papers, you know, retracted are not going to stop doing it, right? Things are going to continue to evolve. I'm sure 10 years ago, if we'd said, oh, we're going to sit in a room and talk about Chat GPT, we would have been like, are we? That sounds weird. You know, things are going to continue to come at us. We're going to need to really be leaning into it and contemplating that. So that's all pretty much I have to say. We'll be here all day too, if you want to talk more about this.
Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you, Wendy, for the introduction. And I appreciate the presentations that we've already heard today from Simone and Anna and Jennifer. They've raised important questions about the power of these technologies, which we have to remind ourselves are tools. They are in our control. And I think you've also raised some important questions we can discuss later around the need for training, for empowerment, and for all of that. I want to speak right now on an important related topic, which is what I call the integrity algorithm. A future author writing a history of human technology will take note of November 30th, 2022. In a tweet that afternoon, @SamA wrote, "Today we launched ChatGPT. Try talking with it here, chat.openai.com." In a brief thread, @SamA predicted Language interfaces are going to be a big deal, I think. Talk to the computer, voice or text, and get what you want for increasingly complex definitions of want. Going to be a big deal was an understatement. Declarations of breakthroughs in science and technology, however, are given to understatement. In their paper describing the double helix structure of DNA, published in Nature, April 25th, 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick mildly declared, "This structure has novel features which are of considerable biological interest." Sir Alexander Fleming had even less to say about one of the greatest medical discoveries of the 20th century, penicillin. Fleming, who won the Nobel Prize in 1945 for his work, noted about the nature of research, "One sometimes finds what one is not looking for." Going to be a big deal. Oh, yeah. Just a month after its launch in January 2023, ChatGPT had become the fastest growing consumer software application in history, with over 100 million users. Last week, OpenAI announced it had raised $6.6 billion in a funding round that values the company at $157 billion. The new cash, the largest round of venture capital funding ever, brings OpenAI's total VC funds raised to $17.9 billion, making OpenAI the world's best-funded AI startup. Over the last 2 years, talking to the computer has irrevocably moved from fiction to fact. ChatGPT and other related generative AI offerings dominate headlines and conversations like no other innovation in technology since the introduction of the first iPhone. In 2007, editors and executives working in academic and scholarly journals probably did not imagine that a so-called smartphone would dramatically transform their work, although the amazing devices have done just that and changed the publishing world, unquestionably for the better. In 2024, every single person attending this conference surely feels excitement and expectation, along with fear and even dread, over the term artificial intelligence. Living in a new age presents new challenges, and it requires facing up to them. For those involved in publishing, editors, writers, researchers, and technologists, the challenge before us is existential. This is not about whether or when AI will transform our professions. It already has, forever. The questions this conference seeks to address are pressing ethical concerns over public confidence in published information, especially for works appearing in academic and scholarly journals. For the first time since scholarly publishing was inaugurated in 1665, trusted information may face obsolescence. The speed of computing is governed by Moore's law. The speed of misinformation is governed by Twain's rule. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. Whether research papers by academics or essays for college students, ChatGPT generates text with ease. The general accuracy rate of this output is usually estimated at 85%. In a recent paper for the Journal of Medical Internet Research, investigators at Mass General Brigham in Boston examined overall critical decision-making performed by ChatGPT, from generating possible diagnoses to creating care management plans, and they reported a 72% accuracy. While conceding that no real benchmarks exist, corresponding author Dr. Mark Succi said, "We estimate this performance to be at the level of someone who has just graduated from medical school, such as an intern or a resident." Of course, acceptance of new technologies is strictly related to the trust we place in them. Boeing 737 MAX airline crashes in 2018 and 2019 were traced to malfunctioning software that forced the planes into nosedives. The affected aircraft were grounded worldwide for nearly 2 years before receiving clearance to fly again. How many of us, even now, would ride in a driverless Uber? Not me, not yet. OpenAI knows that its chatbot isn't perfect, and it makes no secret of its 85% accuracy rate. The company has human trainers who review and rate ChatGPT responses not only for errors and falsehoods, but also for language that is racist and misogynistic and otherwise biased or offensive. This feedback-driven training process is repeated regularly, improving the model substantially over time. Overshadowing the promise of AI is the peril of placing too much trust in the product. Stephen Schwartz, an attorney with a New York City law firm, learned that lesson. Attorney Schwartz heard about ChatGPT from his college-age children and from the news. He decided to consult the free service when preparing a 10-page brief in a lawsuit against an airline. The plaintiff, his client, claimed injury when hit on the knee by a metal serving cart during a flight. ChatGPT promptly provided relevant court decisions. Consider the rulings in Martinez versus Delta Airlines and Zickerman versus Korean Airlines, not to mention Varghese versus China Southern Airlines and the tolling effect of the automatic stay on a statute of limitations. Yes, you guessed it. ChatGPT had invented all of that. Attorney Schwartz's mistake was to confuse ChatGPT with a search engine, which it is not. While the machine's answers mimic language or speech remarkably well, the responses are based on mathematical calculation and probability, not on any knowledge of a subject. When ChatGPT offers guidance for crossing the English Channel on foot, or for calculating the population of Mars at 2.5 billion, its programmers call this behavior hallucinations. Carl Bergstrom at the University of Washington, Seattle, and Brandon Ogbunu of Yale have proposed a better term for this behavior that has nothing to do with medicine, engineering, or technology. Writing in Undark, an independent digital magazine exploring the intersection of science and society, published by MIT's Knight Science Journalism Fellowship Program, the two biologists broke rank with AI specialists over the term hallucination. When AI chatbots flood the world with false facts confidently asserted, they are not breaking down, glitching out, or hallucinating, they stated firmly. No, they're bullshitting. Bullshitting may not have the same air of scientific formality as hallucination or confabulation, they continued, but it is closer to the truth of the matter. The language we use for AI is consequential. It shapes the way we interact with the technology and how we perceive its outcomes. Bullshit doesn't discriminate. Falling for it eventually happens to everyone. As a former journalist, I advise we always follow the newsroom's golden rule. Consider the source. The core principles of journal publishing that editorial professionals hold to are always vulnerable to attack. AI poses a threat, but hardly one unseen in past generations. In February 1998, a quarter century ago, and just before the dawn of the digital revolution, The Lancet published the paper, Ileal Lymphoid Nodular Hyperplasia, Nonspecific Colitis, and Pervasive Developmental Disorder in Children. Author Andrew Wakefield, then a surgeon at London Free Hospital, asserted a genuinely new syndrome linking the MMR vaccine and autism. Apart from faking research data, Wakefield had received financial payments from a UK lawyer preparing a lawsuit against vaccine manufacturers. Investigative reporting later revealed that Wakefield knew his own laboratory had carried out tests whose results dramatically contradict his claim. From the article's publication to its retraction took nearly 13 years. In that time, the fake science had raised public skepticism around the world about vaccines that persist today. The hero of the story is Brian Deere, an investigative journalist writing for the Sunday Times. In 2011, a BMJ editorial declared, "It has taken the diligent skepticism of one man standing outside medicine and science to show that the paper was in fact an elaborate fraud." Diligent skepticism. In ancient Greek, skeptikos referred to an inquirer, someone who tirelessly searched for truth. An honest skeptic responds to assertions not with disbelief, but with suspension of belief until the evidence is thoroughly reviewed. A skeptic does not simply substitute personal theories for those assertions. Instead, the skeptic questions and seeks corroboration and confirmation. All important developments in science and technology can trace their roots to this rigorous skepticism. With ever more powerful releases of ChatGPT expected to appear, publishing faces enormous stresses and demanding tests in the years ahead. A decisive response by journal publishing to the misinformation crisis would be a full-throated reaffirmation of what I have called the integrity algorithm, built with the scientific method and cemented by peer review. In this case, I do not mean an anti-plagiarism computer code for authenticating research like Turnitin and Grammarly. I am using algorithm in its basic sense as meaning step-by-step actions for guiding decision-making. Algorithms not only work for machines, but also for humans. The pursuit of and commitment to the integrity algorithm by scientific and academic publishing can revive confidence in content. Contrast the integrity algorithm for journal publishing to the attention algorithm of social media. Online platforms attract user attention with content that elicits strong emotive responses. They subsequently monetize that attention by surrounding the content with advertising. The result is polarization, alienation, isolation. Trust, the building block of scholarly publishing, drives us to a very different place: community and collaboration. Visualize the integrity algorithm as a string of 1 and 0s like any other binary code. 1 for trusted, 0 for not. There are a limited number of steps that end with a peer-reviewed, published journal article. To sustain us and protect us at this moment, we must hold to the integrity algorithm. This powerful rule that guides decision-making in journal publishing is constructed of a code of conduct, not computer code, and it depends on evidence, not bad intentions. Sam Altman says that talking to computers is going to be a big deal. He's right. Certainly, talking chatbots and generative AI technology present an unprecedented challenge to trust and confidence in science and research. Yet researchers and editors, along with colleagues at academia and journalism, can and must deploy the tremendous power of those same tools to transform science and scholarship for the better. In yesterday's Scholarly Kitchen, Dr. Krishna Kumar Venkachalam urged this community not to fear experimenting with AI, but to embrace it. He said, "It is not about handing over control to machines, but about developing open, transparent AI systems that academia can tailor and refine." 2 decades of observing the evolving scholarly publishing ecosystem and interviewing this profession's most thoughtful individuals leaves me confident that we can accomplish much. And that is going to be a very big deal indeed. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your attention.
For those of you joining us online, this is a slightly disembodied voice. I've chosen to see my just outside the scope of the camera, which I was also in control of. That was intentional. We do have a couple questions. Thank you to all of our outstanding presentations. bringing a lot of humor and joy and clarity to the issues of AI and giving us the vocabulary and collectively to address these issues instead of sort of hope that they go as they flow out. So the first question is from Kenny Decker, and this is a question specifically for Jennifer and Anna. Do you have any advice for reconciling policy versus practice with newly available tools? It can be difficult to get staff and editor buy-in and consistent handling for using new tools that are meant to help catch integrity issues early in the process, which make the tools less useful, even if they're great tools. So this is like a human-centered concern.
Yeah, that's a really great and important question. I'll start, and then Anna, if you have anything to add, feel free. I think I would say, first of all, really, really careful planning before you implement any change. And I think you also have to see it as a change management approach. So it's not always just about what software you're using or the specific changes you're making, but taking into account how those changes are going to impact all the different stakeholders. And so I think you have to think about that one step at a time and really carefully plan and roadmap what that's going to look like before you try to implement change. I think with that, you also have to introduce some flexibility. So you can't be too rigid when you're thinking about making those changes. You have to be sure that you allow for, maybe you're going to launch a new software that you're going to be using and that deadline gets pushed back, right? Like you have to be okay with that. And so I think that those planning stages that have a really clear roadmap in advance, but then also allow for the flexibility that change is going to happen and we're going to have to respond to it are super important.
Sure, yeah, I completely agree with what Jennifer said. The only thing I would add to it is as much as our editors, we've all agreed to be part of an editorial board because we have something to add and we know what that is. It's never actually something where we can say we shouldn't be changing, and at least once a year, no matter what it is, whether it's software or screening or ethical concerns, we have to be constantly expecting that we're going to change. So on that note, I would say too, keep in mind what works for your group to help embrace that, whether it is regular training on a regular basis. Maybe you want to bring in a consultant, or one of my favorites, some chocolate chip cookies tends to help with it. So those kinds of things, are definitely gonna help. Think about what helps motivate them and understand how they're being helped and why this is meant to help them.
One more thing I'll add real quick. Someone said this morning in another presentation, I think it's important, is to tell editors why you're doing what you're doing. So I think that's a key point as well, to explain the why behind the change that you're making.
May I add a comment and a question to that? I think it was Jennifer who just was speaking and talking about the need to sort of keep updated on all of this. And I wonder about training. Do you have formalized training around these issues, not just the AI tools themselves, but around addressing ethical concerns?
Yes, it's a really great point and question, Christopher. So yeah, I would say some of the ones that come to mind for me, the Council of Science Editors, or CSE, full disclosure, I am a member of CSE, offers short courses every year as part of something that you can take as an editor or managing editor as well, to help keep people aware of different things, and they all have different topics. But the ethics short course is absolutely something that people can use. I would say as well, for when you're doing training for others on your team as well, it's never a bad idea, since Zoom and Teams and other things have made it easy to record that training and make sure that it's available for a video they can go back and look at.
So let's switch to the audience. We'll just ping pong back and forth. Let's take a question from the audience. There has to be a question. It's AI. It's impossible not to. Okay.
These are programs that you would build for editors and for reviewers to use, or is there an authorship side of that as well, that will allow authors to utilize a similar technology or same technology to look at their own work before submitting to the journal, just to make sure that there's the journal as well.
So the specific technology that we were talking about in the submission portal, authors are uploading a file, and then that file, the metadata from that file is automatically uploaded into the system, and then they have a chance to double check that to make sure all the information is correct. I will say the tools and screening, the specific ones that Anna had on the screen, that's more geared towards editorial office and towards editors as they're looking at papers to determine if there's been any bad behavior that's happened. And obviously sometimes when you're screening, you might find something that looks suspicious. Again, that's why the human element comes in, because it may be that there's an issue, it may not be that there's an issue. And so I think that's why we also have to look at patterns and things that we're finding with software tools that we're using is super important as well.
I just want to sort of interject my own question, and I'll have Simone go first to the panelists. So there are students in the audience and online. What skills, what should they be learning now that's going to help them face the future challenges of AI? Sorry, you go first.
That's okay. I think the future challenges of AI aren't necessarily that different in the sense that you will still use the skills that you use now to try to understand whether an author is an author, whether you know, they've cited references properly. And I think the difference that AI makes is that it will become a lot more pervasive. One, the you know, trying to create artificial papers and pass them off as your own, but also as the AI gets better, it's going to become more difficult. So I guess the key skills would be observation and analytics and continuous learning. You just have to keep up with what's out there.
Awesome answer. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think a skill that needs to be developed throughout life is the one I brought up in my own presentation, which is skepticism. I think that we have placed a great deal of trust in the machines we use to such an extent that the skepticism has kind of gone out of it. And I think that we just need to remind ourselves, train ourselves to ask questions, to consider the source, to maybe look in another place or two or three to verify the information that we have, because it's just too easy, I think, to submit a question to ChatGPT, get a very quick response. I've done it myself, and then just take that and run. I don't think we want to do that. I think we need to really approach all of this with great care, and the kind of skepticism that we place in all sorts of other parts of our lives, we should put that same skepticism in the machines that we use.
Thank you.
We've got one more question from our online community. This is from an anonymous attendee, so it could be an AI submitting it. Skepticism. How hard would it be to convince editor-in-chiefs and editorial boards that unique or custom workflows that they may want are a detriment to integrity by way of the importance of consistency? Would it be easier if we contextualize time savings, proactive effectiveness, while still enabling their own points of view?
I will, yeah, so I think communication is key, right? So I will not tell you it will be easy, anonymous attendee, or even if you are AI. I don't know that a ton of really worthwhile things are easy, right? But from the standpoint of communication, it is good for them to understand there are actual implications to everything that they've asked for, and to understand. So historically, I have a lot of experience with a different peer review system as well. And we would have people ask for a custom submission question be added to the form frequently following an editorial board meeting where it had been brought up and we're going to do this. And then there wasn't necessarily anybody in the room who was saying, we'd also like to be able to report on that later, right? And so making sure we think really about the entire life cycle of anything that we're asking for and how that will play out. And if you're willing to defend that in 5 years, right?
Is it good? Okay, so I have a question for each of the panelists, because there's a side that, while you're talking about AI, it's very easy to get fearful. It's very easy to like just focus on all of the things that are of concern. They're very important things, right? But I also want to hear from each of you about what excites you about AI and publishing, because there's a lot of things personally for me in the work that I do every day that I am looking forward to, because there are things we would never be able to resource to do with humans that could really help the research process. So Simone, well, I'll start with Chris this time. I started with you first last time, so I don't want to put you on the spot again. So Chris, you're first.
Well, it's a great question. It's an important point, and it's one I also really do want to emphasize. I did a program in June on LinkedIn called "Why AI is Your Ally," directed at publishing, and I believe that it truly is going to prove to be an ally more than a danger or a nemesis. And that means embracing it, understanding it, but also doing it in ways that have already been raised throughout these other presentations here, to be ethical, to be responsible to rights holders, to think about the biases that are involved. But I just think the starting point can't be fear. It needs to be a kind of welcoming of this new technology in a way that we've welcomed other kinds of technologies into our professional lives before.
Thank you.
And we just building on what Chris said, I think AI's true value will lie in how it can amass content and then process that in quick time that people can't do. So I can see advantages in, say, the peer review process, reviewing references in real time, checking things like that to help people. Anything that makes a process more efficient, I think, will be of immense value to publishing. But it's just making sure that we're not asking the artificial intelligence to replace the tasks, so for instance, I'm very skeptical about using an artificial intelligence system to review a paper, because I think that requires knowledge and it requires human analytical skills. But asking an artificial intelligence system to say, search for all the articles that were written between the years of X and Y and list those for me, that would be helpful to an author and to a reviewer.
Wonderful. And I should have admitted, I use ChatGPT every day. I have a 15-year-old and his homework has exceeded my ability to quickly help them. So it's the most efficient way I can get to the end point. So Jennifer.
Thank you. So I think very similar to what Simone was saying, again, leaning into the technology as a tool and ways we can find new AI technology to be a tool that helps us is important, but again, not replacing the human judgment that's needed in the decisions that we're making. And I would say if you're in this room, especially you're getting ready to graduate, when it comes to thinking about AI technology, this is a fantastic industry to be in. And there are so many great voices and experts in this space that are continually helping us do what I talked about earlier with scanning that horizon and seeing things that are becoming threats, but also things that can make our jobs easier on a day-to-day basis. And it's a really great community to sort of discuss and be a part of together. And I think that's going to be a really big, important part of our future.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I agree with all of the other panelists as well. The only other thing that really, for me, makes me excited is analyzing things. So there was already so much data created by all of us every day now. And so having a manageable way to actually analyze what's even come out in the last year, I think those kinds of, in some ways, time savers, but just being able to help do that analysis is what I'm most excited.
Awesome answers. We have a couple more questions from the audience.
I have a question for Simone. In thinking about expanding that industry for publishers when it comes to using peer reviewed content that publishers are producing in the way of generative AI, is there an existing framework or a case study that we generally look to? I know that you mentioned the OpenAI being with Reddit, and do you envision sort of a consortium, or would it be more individual licensing deals that publishers are creating? Or sort of what would you project the future that would look like? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question and something that happens a lot. We're not there yet. These are all new things. I think it would help if we had a framework that looks at the value of content and who is to say what value means. But there's so many different uses and so many different applications. And we've got to remember there's publishers, particularly in the scholarly space, by definition, our content is of use to a relatively narrow audience. So Google might pay Reddit's 200 million for content that we wouldn't necessarily consider high value. But from Google's perspective, it will have wide market applications. For our case, it might be high value, but it will reach a specific subgroup. So there are very many different factors that will eventually influence how we price this and how we sell it. But ultimately, I think as publishers, we have an obligation to the people who entrust us with the rights of creation and the intellectual property to make sure we give them the best returns from that relationship. But I will continue to work with other people to see us get to more excellent place. So that's your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I go to charity, and then there's one more, I'll add that I hear these conversations every day, and a question publishers ask themselves in the scholarly space is, can they afford not to include their content, right? Because help it, right? And if they, and so, anyway, Charity, my newest colleague, by the way, so.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Charity Paris. I'm at Johns Hopkins University Press. And my question is really from over there, but it kind of came to me during the discussion about being proactive versus reactive. I really enjoyed that presentation, but it got me thinking about that in terms of AI and what ways can we working in publishing companies and just other areas in general when we're using AI, and what ways can we be proactive when using AI? Because I think I really am interested in this because it is our sample pilot is so small, like it's a very new thing. And so there are certain things that we can't even really predict might be an issue. So I'm wondering with what we have so far, how soon we are in the process, or earlier in the process, and what ways can we work to be more proactive.
Chris, do you want to go first, and then I don't have to run this far?
I'm having a little trouble hearing, but I think the
Okay, I
point
think,
was
and Charity, forgive me if you want to correct how I paraphrase this, but in what ways should publishers be proactive in this space? And maybe this gets to sort of the truth and integrity of the content that we produce. Sort of instead of being fearful, but like, you know, approach it head on. Is that a fair?
Yes, thank you.
Are you sure? Okay.
yes. So I guess I would just get back to the point that we had earlier, and that we discussed briefly with Jennifer, which is around the training. I think that people can't figure this out on their own. I think it's kind of a conference is a great example of people coming together in the sense of community and collaboration that's going to be necessary moving forward. And so I would say if I put it in a single word bumper sticker, it would be training. That would be the real thing that I would do. And I think there are plenty of people out there. There are AI ethicists, there are technologists, there are all sorts of thinkers who have addressed these issues for many years. And I think they can present their insights to the publishing world and really help us move forward.
Thank you. And I think we have one hand still up, so I think this will be our last question. As I'm walking back there, I'll say the two words that have come up the most have been training and integrity through all of these presentations and answers.
Okay, that's for last, right? So very open question with anyone, speakers on the panel or in the room. Just wondering, do you think in the age of AI, it's going to change the incentive structure for publishing. Just to give you a very concrete example, for example, if you're what's the incentive for a reader to go directly to a journal, right? If they expect they can just type in a question into a chat box and get a lot of information. And if then journals are trying to license their content to large language model providers, right? So that they get included in these chatbot answers, kind of what's the incentive for authors to submit specific journals if they're not being licensed with one of these model providers? Why should peer reviewers continue to interact with their incentive review articles and on and on? I'm just wondering what people think the
It's a meaty question. Who would like to tackle that?
I'll say one, yeah. So that is an excellent question. I don't know that AI specifically is enough of a thing to impact it. I will certainly be interested in watching this space too. But I think that the incentives for authors to publish in specific journals hasn't necessarily always been even the name of the journal, but what it means for their career. And I think the same, I've heard many reviewers say they're doing it because they want to give back to the community. So I don't know that AI will change those, but I am hopeful that it will bring more of those conversations up. At a certain point, if there were no new content for those readers, they would ideally notice. Although perhaps the chat GPT is like, well, we'll just do anything. Yeah. So I do think it plays into it, and it gives authors and reviewers more of a reason to be part of that conversation. But I don't know, that a specific journal can fix it or a specific technology can fix it as much as it needs a community.
Can I just add to that, I think that the point around incentives is a great one to raise. And, for researchers, for scholars, what they really want to do is share knowledge. That's why they get up in the morning. And if we think about these AI tools, not just the ChatGPT piece of it, but the way that machine learning can do research and all that sort of thing, I think where we're leading is a world where results matter and speed matters. And so the incentives for researchers are going to be around getting the nugget of innovation, discovery, the breakthrough, getting it into the world so it can be used in ways to improve our lives. And I think, frankly, and it's probably a scary proposition for many in the room, what that means is really questioning what the article is going to be about in the future. So really incentives for the scientists, for the researchers, for the academics is sharing that information. And it may be that the article, as we know it, isn't the best vehicle in the future.
Okay, I'd love to keep going with that conversation, especially from the perspective of an aggregator, because what's the role of an aggregator? Because you keep going on and on. With that said, I did run over time. I apologize for cutting into the break, but it was a great conversation. And if we could give the panelists like a last round of applause.
All right, so yeah, I want to thank Wendy for a great job moderating. Thanks, Simone. Thanks, Jennifer and Anna, and thanks, Chris.